the last one I have time for today, I do have more 5 to 25s, and I will be comparing a couple more in the future, but last one I have time for today is the Arken EP5 5 to 25. I think it would be foolish to not include this in there. Not that these are so similar, like they're really different price points, but they are both 5 to 25. And for the person who says that the $300 or $400 or $500 optic is just as good as the $2,400 optic, we're going to talk about that a little bit and what kind of differences there are between these two. I've competed with both these. I like both these optics a lot. I've used the Arken quite a bit more, and I do have some good experience with it, and I've definitely kind of finalized a few opinions that I had been holding out on since the Discovery 5 to 25 versus Arken 5 to 25 video. And so I'll talk a little bit about that right now. So starting off, I guess I'll go to the Magnification throw lever. This one is modular. You can take it off and move it around. And so that's a pro. That's a good thing. You can take it off and move it out of the bolt. In fact, right here, I come really close. I know you can't see it from your angle, but I come really close and I can just simply loosen the Allen and move it over. I think it's pretty smooth. And without the cat, it's still pretty smooth. There is not a lot of slop in there, but there's a little bit between the collar here that moves your lenses in unison when you magnify something. It's a really important thing to not have slop in. There's a little bit there. I go back and forth. Yeah, there's a little bit, but it's not too bad. Not so much that I would even really say too much about it. I just notice it. Yeah, pretty nice and smooth. It is not as nice and smooth as the Zeiss. Again, and that should really be expected at this price point, but it's not as nice. One of the things I feel is just a tiny, tiny little bit of grit in there. A little bit of grit, just sometimes. And then sometimes it feels like it just slips a little bit. It probably isn't, but maybe it's just a little bit of grit in there, something like that. It's decent. It's definitely decent. It's not to the level of the Zeiss. The Zeiss is just smoother. It's more consistent. The effort to move this is slightly easier than the Arken, but not by much. The Arken is pretty easy to move, even with one finger. Just moves the rifle a little bit when I do it. Okay. Let's lock this down. Moving on to let's go with the Illumination. Illumination on Arken optics is, it's fine. It's fine. It's not ever really super bright. The reticle is a little bit small for some people, kind of thin. The illumination isn't a strong factor for the Arken, and that doesn't bother me. If I was going to shoot at the evening, and I've used it with night vision before too, it's fine. I can pick it up. It's just not daylight bright, and it's not even really like evening bright sometimes. If there's a little bit of sun out, as there is right now on the gun, it's not too bright on the targets. But right before sundown, early in the morning, yeah, it's pretty decent. I think I can pick it out. And so if you're an illumination snob, the Arken is just not going to get there compared to the Zeiss, which has the dual illumination, and it's much brighter. I'll move over to the parallax knob. Now this one goes from 25 yards, and the numbers are 25, 35, 50, 100, 200, 300, 500, 1,000, and then infinity after that. The first thing I'll say is I really appreciate the texture on all the knobs and dials on the Arken scopes. Even when it's cold and things start to get a little more hard to move, it takes more force to move them in the cold. Arkens are usually still pretty good. I don't have a lot of trouble moving any of these knobs or dials when it's cold. It does only go down to 25 yards, which is great for NRL 22, which is this probably is aimed really well at base class NRL 22. I wish it went down lower. I wish it was 15 or 10 yards. It would be just that much cooler to me. You could use it more for air gunning things, or again, setting the plumb bob indoors. 25 yards though is pretty good. I can settle for that, especially on a 22. If I need to, if I'm shooting at 10 yards and I'm on 25 yard parallax, I can just move this down to like 8 power, 6 power, and the parallax isn't quite as noticeable to me, but it's still there. It's still an error. So the Zeiss wins out. It gets closer, but here's where they're going to be level. The smoothness. Even though this is a big dial, it's a big parallax dial on the Arken, so technically it's maybe easier to grab and move and kind of finesse a little bit, and it's got that texture on there. Even though the Zeiss dial is smooth and the dial itself doesn't have a lot of texture, they're equal. This is a nice parallax dial, definitely very nice. Moves freely. I don't feel like I fight the gun to get it to just be a little bit. You know, if I know I'm just a touch off, it's kind of frustrating with tight parallax dials, because if you're just a little bit off and you're wobbling your head trying to set that parallax, and then you just kind of move it too much and you can never really get it right there. With these lighter or less pressure, you know, to move dials, I'm going to say it's probably every bit as good as the Zeiss as far as fluidity, smoothness. Yeah, the lubricity of that is good. And with the numbers pretty much line up until I got to like 500 yards, and then past 500 yards, it's anybody's guess. And the infinity dial, I've never really pushed it all the way to infinity. It's always been a little bit before that. But it's a pretty good dial. All right, we'll move on to turrets. And for Arken, guys, this is probably the bread and butter. The main thing, the mashed potatoes of meat. What is it? Bread and butter? For the Arken guys, this is kind of the meat and mashed potatoes. This is for the Arken guys, the turrets are really the thing they probably would be the most boisterous about and be the most excited about. So definitely tactile. I don't even need to bring this close to my mic, I'm sure. Very clicky. Has 32 mils of internal E, which is great, especially in the class and the price of this optic. 32 mils is plenty. And it tracks wonderfully. I don't have concerns with any of the optics with tracking that I've brought today for comparison. But they do have kind of a tracking guarantee, which is cool. Stainless bits on the inside. The distance between clicks, a lot of people like that. There's a little bit more distance than the Zeiss. I would say at least it feels that way. It might be the same, but it feels like there's more distance. It does require a little bit more effort to get the dial to move. And it's just so much louder. It has a nice hard zero stop, mechanical zero stop there. And that's appreciated. I don't really like the soft or quiet zero stops so much. I don't prefer them. I'm gonna say it's easy for me to accidentally go like a tenth or two beyond where I want to go. If I'm going fast, I need to get to 6.3. So yeah, I went to 6.2, got one more. And that does happen from time to time, just the way that these turrets are. But I actually am a big fan of the Arken turrets. I think they're really good. They're huge. They're oversized turrets for sure. Have a great texture to them. I don't have too many complaints about them at all. Setting the zero stop is easy enough. They've been reliable. And I haven't had too many issues with like the Allens backing out or anything like that. Some people complain about that, but I've never had that, and I've had several Arken. The Zeiss now, it does have more travel, more internal travel. They're quieter. They're not as loud. They're still very clicky, and they're very tactile, but they feel slightly smoother. Some people might say that's a more expensive feel or a higher quality feel than these. These are just real, you know, just aggressive and harsh. I just like it. So I'm actually going to give the feel of these turrets the win for that. I think these feel better in a lot of ways. I do still skip past one, or I might have trouble getting to that exact 10th real fast. But if time is not an issue, or I have a second to dial in, both of these can do it. I just think the size of this, the aggressiveness of the texture is a little better on this one. But these Zeiss are really nice, and I just know from the tests between the two of them that the tracking is fine on both. So is there even a clear winner? I'm not sure. I just know that the feel of this, the auditory sound of these, is preferable to me. So that's my opinion about that. 50 millimeter bell on this, 56 millimeter on this. Now let's talk about the glass. Okay, so first thing I'll say is this image is not as bright as the Zeiss. The contrast is not quite as good, and there is a little bit of CA around the edges. And this is the EP5, guys, not the SH4. The SH4 And this, there's a difference between those two, dramatic difference between these two, actually. But I can tell, yeah, there's some CA around the target, getting just a little bit of a bluish, purplish hue off to the sides. And this is only at 200 yards, you know. As far as contrast between the gray, the black, the brown, silver on the target, it's trickier to pick out for sure. Even at 25 power here, it's just a little more blended. Colors blend together a little more. The orange is not as bright. The red is not as bright. It's 100% for sure. Not even a question. I probably sound a little harsh right now. It's not a bad image. This is actually a pretty decent scope, especially at the price point. A lot of people should be very, very happy with the performance they're getting for a sub, you know, $600-700 optic. It's underneath that price point. But I can tell. Field of view is just fine. The eye box is tight. I'm not going to say it's the worst that I've had of all the scopes. I've definitely had worse. Even recently, I've had some worse optics for eye relief. But it's touchy. When I get up to 25 power, I'm fishing for it a little bit. I'm having a little trouble. When I back it off just a little bit, so even go down to 20 power, it's not nearly as difficult for me. And thankfully, I don't usually shoot at 25 power with this optic. But it is just much more, it's more touchy at 25. I can tell. Head placement, level, all this kind of stuff. Distance from the ocular lens here. It makes a big difference. And I'm pretty used to it. I've actually got kind of a interesting setup here. So I have this folder on this gun. And also a stock that I can bring in real close, because this is the gun I loan out during NRL 22. So my friends can shoot with me, and I can adjust the length of pull for them so they're comfortable. But this eye box is just a little bit touchy for pretty much everybody who gets on it if you get up to that 25 power. I noticed that at 5 power, just at 5 power, it might be a little bit of fishbowl going on there at 5 power. It's got a decent field of view. There might be a little bit of fishbowl going on there. And I do have this on a 50 MOA rail already. So you're close to the extreme end of range on the other end. And I'm going to dial it up to the extreme there. And go back to 25 power and look at the edges. Okay, let's do this. Definitely getting a little bit of that fishbowl, a little bit of that tunneling. Like I got a little bit more of a black ring here on the bottom. It's kind of tricky to get my eye in the right spot here now. I'm definitely having a little trouble centering up. More noticeable than with the other optics even. But it also has 32 mils of internal travel, so I'm going a further distance. Some of the other optics limit that, so you don't deal with this quite as much. Edge of the glass. I'll tell you, the edge of the glass, it does have some chromatic aberration. A little bit of color fringing. It's not quite as clear down there. I can see a little bending and stuff. Yeah, it's just not super clear. If I compare between, let's see, the center of the glass right here, go down towards the edge, absolutely, there's a little distortion there. But when I say a little, I'm saying it's still pretty good. It's not as much as people sometimes make it out to be. It's not nearly as much as the SH4 had. The color fringing on the SH4 was just much more noticeable. Now this reticle does have some really good things going for it. I should probably talk about that. With the EP5, and this is the, what do they call this reticle? Can't remember what this reticle is called. It has 12 mils of holdover. Okay, and then there's like the 13th mil ends up being on a chevron type tip. And there's like 13.5 with another line through a transparent post. And then the thick post ends up being, so is that 13.5, 14. So you have roughly 14 mils of information that you could use there. It's not terribly busy. It is a thin reticle, and a lot of people complain about thin reticles and very small sized dots. That's one thing to be aware of if you have trouble picking up reticles or smaller sized dots in reticles. I think this reticle would be difficult for you, but even though my eyes aren't perfect, I am able to shoot this, and I've been able to shoot some really tight groups with it because it's fine. Numbers really don't block too much. I like the way that the reticle is set up with dots instead of lines all the way through windage. When you have lines all the way through windage, it does end up obscuring targets, and sometimes you miss an impact at really, really long ranges, distances, because it landed, like the bullet landed in the weeds where one of those lines were. This reticle just has dots all the way through for windage, and I think there's an advantage there. Yep, just a little bit of that color fringing, a little bit of distortion, a little bit of, I'll say, contrast issues. I think there's a little bit of contrast issues going on there. Not terrible. Certainly not any worse than the price point. Like, I can't think of anything else that competes with this at the price point other than the Discovery 5-25. That PRS scope that I reviewed, they're pretty equal, I think, when it comes to glass quality and also eye relief issues. I think they're pretty close to each other in performance. Just a little bit of that tunneling towards the bottom, but a very acceptable optic. Obviously, I like it. It's on the gun that I shoot all the time. These two guns get shot probably more than the other ones, actually. And I'm really happy with the both of them. Obviously, neither of them is a base class rifle at this price point, but if I wanted to, I could probably throw this optic on a base class CZ 457 and do pretty good with it. Or I can shoot this, and this is just a more expensive build. All right, there you have it, guys. That's as much as I have time for today. There is a storm rolling in. I will do a follow-up video comparing some more 5-25s or similar magnification ranges that are first focal plane, 34mm tube. Things are just close enough. I'll do another follow-up video there. If there's something that you didn't see reviewed that you want to see reviewed or compared against this, go ahead and drop that down in the comments. Let those manufacturers know that you want to see that on my channel. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the manufacturers who sent stuff out to my channel so I could do these overviews and comparisons. The reason that they're all on my channel is because I like them. I only do business with the companies that I like. It's one of the privileges I get to have. And so I'm going to say everything that you saw today, I personally like, and it's on one of my personal guns. And that's going to say something. I could have a lot of them. I could buy probably a lot of different optics if I wanted to, but I like these ones for the reasons that you heard a little bit in the video and some that you'll hear in future videos. My next question for you is, if you owned the 4-25 Zeiss, what would you put it on? Would it be on a hunting gun, a competition gun, a hybrid gun? I would love to hear what caliber and what gun you would put it on in your personal collection and why. Why would you put it on that gun? What makes sense about that for you? The next question I have is the price justified? At around $2,200, a little bit more than that, around $2,200, is the price justified for this optic? And if you think it is, go ahead and comment down below and why you think it's justified. If it's not justified, comment that down below too. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I already have it. I love the optic. You're not going to change my mind either, but I'd love to hear what you guys think about that. Until next time, maybe watch one of these videos, but keep your powder dry, and I'll try to get some more content with these Zeiss 4-25 LRP.